Howdy y'all, and welcome back to another bi-yearly build spotlight. Today we're looking at the famous Big Mac build, originally created by Bonlo and popularized by Shrimplified. Now, what even is the Big Mac build? The Big Mac build, in its most iconic form, is Titanomachia, Firebird, Scorched Antiquity, Boreal, and Guardian. This is the version made by Bonlo, and it's called Big Mac because the chestplate and leggings look like meat between the quote-unquote buns of the helmet and boots. Shrimplified made some damage optimizations on this by adding crafted rings and fire sanctuary. Accessories are really your choice. If you use crafted rings, they're pretty optimal. They give you the highest damage variant of the build and add 1000 health regen. Otherwise, double downfall with Dupla Blaze and D-Solar Amulet is my recommendation. I'll put a few variations of the build in the description as well. On a deeper level, it's Regen Thankk Blood Pact Paladin. The idea behind the build is to have such a ridiculously high health regen that you don't even need to build mana. You can just use Blood Pact entirely to cast your spells. Just looking at the EHP of the build, it's actually quite breathtaking. You get a pretty easy 100k EHP, and if you start adding modifiers on top of that, it starts getting ridiculous. If you're not using macros, you can even get Dauntless Inferno 67% uptime. But in practice, you're not going to see the benefit of most of that EHP. Your health bar actually plays a lot like Fallen. When not DPSing, you're going to be just straight up unkillable. But when you start casting spells, you'll spend most of your time below 50% health and can easily get below 30% health. Now that means you still have in excess of 50k and 30k EHP at those percentages, which is why this build even works in the first place. It's just not the uber safe hyper tank playstyle that might appear as on paper. In fact, your real tankiness comes from HPR and rejuvenating skin. When the build is up and running, you're healing about 1000 health per second just off rejuvenating skin. And when regen procs, you're healing anywhere between 6k and 8k health. Don't let that fool you though. The build is not unkillable. I've died in the build, and if you've seen Shrimplified's video, you know he died at the end too. But every time you die, it's always operator error. In fact, if you just stop DPSing for a second, you'll likely heal to full. Point being, it is a very tanky build, but it's not just mindlessly tanky, right? You still need to think about how you're playing it, and in TNA, you still need to dodge skulls. Likewise, you can't even face tank Grootslang jaws, though you can just make it Ouroboros itself with little effort by running in a circle, so it's not a huge problem. Just like how you can just charge around in a circle to dodge TNA skulls. On that note, there are some funny quirks to the build. For instance, having a high HP rolled on your guard is actually probably a bad thing. Since Blood Pact goes off of percentage HP, the higher HP you have, the more damage you're going to be taking from it. Obviously, this boosts rejuvenating skin too, but it also decreases the effectiveness of your HPR, since it will heal back a lower percentage of it. Likewise, healing effectiveness is actually a really good stat for you, since rejuvenating skin is healing you for so much. So when picking expertise tomes and raid buffs, keep that in mind. Finding any way to switch rings to Symbiont might not even be a bad idea, if that's something you're into. Now on to the ability tree. There's a lot of different permeations of skills for this tree. Bonlo takes the best cost tree, taking bash cost reduction, and the upper cost reduction after Heavenly Trumpet. Shrimplified takes the lowest cost reduction route and takes Emboldening and Radiance. I actually take a different tree. I don't take Trumpet like Bonlo and Shrimplified. Instead, I take Provoke. The reason I take Provoke is because it opens up so many avenues of gameplay, and I think it really turns this into a special build. My opinion is, this build is not a DPS build. It's not meant to be. I think its best use is filling the entire support section of a party while still contributing towards DPS. In TNA, when I use Provoke, I can keep Greg still for the entirety of the fight, kind of. Except for when he skulls and you still have to run away from that, right? Because many of the classes require aggro to do damage to Greg, like Bolt Slinger, Labyrinth, and Acolyte. Being able to keep the boss still adds tons of invisible DPS because everyone in your group is able to approach optimal, on-paper DPS. This isn't even considering the fact that you're boosting team EHP by around 50% with Guardian Major ID, boosting damage with Radiance, using Dauntless Inferno, and having your own DPS. By the way, if you're the only warrior in the party, you're boosting team EHP by about 2.2 times with all of your buffs. If you're not the only warrior, Dauntless and Guardian Major ID are still buffing EHP by almost 1.8 times. Additionally, if you take Altruism as a raid buff, you can do insane healing. Every region proc is healing your entire team for likely over 6,000, which feels like even more due to Guardian's Major ID. I often end raids with 1 million healing if I take Altruism. A fun thing to take note of, also for this class, is that duos really well with healers. You're giving mages Fortitude and Orbs, and Acolyte, you're giving them Blood Pool and healing them if you have Altruism. Of the two, Acolyte with Big Mac is a match made in heaven. You boost their damage so ridiculously high by keeping bosses inside their totems and topping off their blood pool. And they make you immortal and give you infinite quote-unquote mana, which obviously in this case is actually just your health. Now there is some problems with the build. If you watch Shrimplified's video, you're probably expecting to do over 100k DPS consistently and make up a large chunk of your raid party's damage. Unfortunately, that damage comes with a lot of caveats. For starters, Shrimplified's DPS uses macros. You might be thinking, oh, that's fine, I use macros, so I can reach that DPS. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is that even without macros, Big Mac can have trouble sustaining its health. With macros, as you can see with Shrimplified's LI run, you're running into very dangerous territory. The only reason he reached such crazy DPS on bosses is because he had a mage keeping his health topped off, effectively giving him quote-unquote infinite mana. Not to say that you can't reach high damage on bosses. In my testing today, I could consistently approach 3 million on Grootslang if we didn't have an Acolyte or a Labyrinth. And on Greg, my 3 highest damage runs, I had 9.5 million, 14.7 million, and 16.9 million. I'm just saying to temper your expectations if you want to try out the build yourself. Because, as you can see at the start of the video, I can only reach about 75k consistent DPS with Big Mac. Though this is due to me not having the right aspects. Ideally, I should be running Fallen and Holy Power aspects, I just don't have them. I think in a perfect scenario with Endurance and the right aspects, you should be able to hit something like 100k DPS, but not much more unless you run macros with a healer. Also, my demonstration at the beginning probably isn't very accurate since I lag a lot more when recording. Now the question you've all been waiting for. Is it meta? Short answer, no. Long answer is that if you want to play Paladin, it is probably meta for like TNA, NOL, and maybe Grootslang, but I would not recommend bringing it into TCC. You just don't have enough damage. If you pick Altruism with rage buffs, I think there's a case to be made that you can replace the healer role and just run 3 DPS with you being the sole tank and healer. Or it could work really well with like 1 Big Mac and 3 Acolytes or 3 Labyrinths. Being able to put the boss where you want it is going to work wonders. I think it also works great as like a solo queue build if you want consistency and flexibility. Now for my final thoughts. On this channel and in my gameplay, I highlight a lot of builds I would call quote-unquote selfish tanks. These are builds where you trade DPS to be virtually unkillable, but you don't do much for your party. You're just there in case things go poorly and you have to solo. Big Mac is not that type of build. In fact, since I've used Big Mac, I've never had to solo any bosses I've gone into. With Provoke and Altruism, I'm actually supporting my team and keeping them alive so that nobody has to solo. Moreover, I think the playstyle is just so unique. On paper, you're playing the hyper tank of hyper tanks, Boreal Guardian. Who would think that occasionally you're going to top the leaderboard on your raid damage? It's just such a cool concept. It weirdly plays a lot like 1.20 Save Your Sacrifice hero, and I love it. Highly recommend trying the build out if you haven't. And for the rest of the video, I'm just going to play some fun songs and have some gameplay of me playing the Big Mac build. Anyways, y'all have a good one. I'll see you in about 2 years for my next build spotlight video.
Describe you any illness you like if you define the terms of your ailment. You could sing a pretty melody like a black canary, but a crow don't know the smell of carbon monoxide. How many years have you been on that couch? They could have quilled you in the throes by now. You draw a line in the sand where it ends and you begin, but the tide rolls in, so who knows? Oh well, and a little I did, and he never hurt nobody, but on yourself. So how many milligrams of you are still left in there? Well, 'cause back in my day we didn't need no feel-good pills and no psychiatrists. No, we just drank ourselves to death. God damn it, we liked it. Call, what's the symptom, what's the flaw, can it be both? Well, I suppose that's an answer. Would you give up your humanity for just a touch of sanity? Cause God knows it's not like it's cancer. And good news to the purest, they discovered a cure for the symptoms of being alive. It's a painless procedure with a low rate of failure, but very few patients survive. And a little conformity never hurt nobody, but lately I've been worried that you're losing yourself. So how many milligrams of you are still left in there? Whoa, 'cause back in my day we didn't need no feel-good pills and no psychiatrists. No, we just bled out in our bed. God damn it, we liked it. Prognosis if the studies show that disease is in the eye of the beholder. Tell me so it goes. We depress to impress, I guess, and layer after layer to get off our chest. It's cold out now, we can take it off later. Better safe than sorry, and we both know the danger. So, doctor, could you run another test? Got a feeling that this time I might just pass it. Well, if you raise the average, well, I'll sing when the bell curve rings, and lyrics symptomatic of the way we think. And our harmonies don't sink, we can change our voices. A chorus on condition of a diagnosis. So back in my day, we didn't need no feel-good pills and no psychiatrists. What can I say except I need no evil wills? Moral nihilists, I said back in the days of lobotomies, it's not that being mad scientists. Oh, don't you make me waste my breath. God damn it! Ain't your identity at stake? Does aspirin kill you with the pain? You're not your thoughts, you're not your brain. You're just the character you've made. Up in your head, down in your heart. What seem like separate body parts come together to believe they're you and not just chemistry. It's not the way that you were raised or what the advertisements say. Not what you pay for or what you pray for, what you want or what you say. And I see your tendency to redefine disease by what you need. And I'm afraid I can't prescribe the diagnosis that you seek. And something tells me that you need. Forgive me now if I misspeak, but something tells me that you like, and something tells me you prefer to be sitting there flipping through those old issues of People. Well, that's our time. See you next week. Well, he collapsed with Stevens-Johnson syndrome on the ER floor. Panic attack, anaphylactic and ataxic. Well, the way he spun his butterfly wrist, all 6 his phalanges rummaged. his synapses. And the method with which he recycled his humans, Trojan horse, his blood-brain barrier, and raised the LD50, yes, yes. And threw flat off by revelation shame the Blackbox warrior. He skipped his town and headed straight down his street. Shows himself from reason in a Kevlar baby blue tuxedo, built it from the finest fibers, flesh and fiberglass and flowers. Ego, a mosquito, evil incarnate, good incognito, pops placebos for libido, screaming bless the torpedoes. For what? For what? For what it's worth. If it was gonna kill you, boy, it would have by now. For what? For what? For what it's worth. There's no more looking back, it's looking up or looking down. Jugular when they came. But they found him with a map to every victim of his love and a tattoo of a blue jay on his face. And they waited for his final sad to lie and let a flatline cry at him out in Hungarian harmonic. But he cocked his noggin through his stoma, sang for all lang syne. Happy birthday to the succulents, all die of hydroponics. His ribcage was a hornet's nest, and palpitations set the beat. His vagus nerve duction, not axle, hit your carrot bent. He wondered if Christ consciousness would charge a cancellation fee off insane. Right by the rents. For what? For what? For what it's worth. If it was gonna kill you, boy, it would have by now. For what? For what? For what it's worth. There's no more looking back, it's looking up or looking down.
is a constant entrapment of tunnels which tangle and wind and beguile, and regardless of where